The Collector, an unexplained haunting. I've always considered myself a man of facts, an engineer by trade. I deal in blueprints, tolerances, and the law of physics. My world is governed by logic. So when people talk about ghosts, possession, or things that go bump in the night, I dismiss it as poor wiring or creaking foundations or the brain's knack for filling in blanks. I don't believe in the paranormal. I just don't. But I can't explain what happened with the doll. And sometimes late at night, I feel like I'm still living with the echo of it. The whole thing started innocently enough. A birthday present for my daughter, Chloe. Chloe is 27 and has always been a little anachronistic, preferring the quiet company of antique dolls to the loud noise of modern technology. She doesn't just collect them, she studies them, researches their origins, and learns about the materials used in their construction. She's particularly fascinated by the bisque and composition dolls of the mid-19th century. So it was during one of my late-night scrolls on the hugely popular online shopping platform, the one that sells everything from paper clips to patio furniture, that I stumbled across it. It was listed by an independent seller with the handle Curio Finds. The description was short and compelling. Rare German bisque doll, circa 1865. Original human hair wig. Beautiful condition. The eyes, they said, were glass fixed in pale blue. The price was, well, quite steep, but the craftsmanship was stunning, even in the blurry photos. I knew Chloe would just adore it. It would be the centerpiece her collection lacked. I hit buy. So then the package arrived a week later, not in one of the usual branded boxes, but in a thick brown cardboard cube that felt strangely heavy and dense, like it had been packed with concrete or something. The box was taped shut with an excessive amount of old, yellowed packing tape, and the shipping label, the actual carrier label, looked almost wet, the ink already bleeding into the paper fibers as if it had been printed years ago, not just days. I signed for it and felt a cold draft even on a warm afternoon. I took the box up to my home office, intending to unbox it discreetly so I could wrap it later. I cut away the heavy tape. Inside, nestled in a baffling mixture of ancient newsprint and modern foam peanuts, was the doll, and it was beautiful. And utterly unsettling, if I'm going to be honest. She was about 2 feet tall, dressed in a faded, lace-trimmed velvet gown that smelled faintly of camphor and dust. Her face was perfect bisque, smooth and delicate, framed by a thick, dark human hair wig that felt dry to the touch. But the eyes, they were what got me. Pale blue, hand-blown glass, fixed in a stare that was too wide, too vacant, yet somehow too intense. They seemed to catch and magnify every available sliver of light, reflecting the room back at me with cold, crystalline precision. I decided the spare bedroom's upper shelf out of easy sight was the best place to keep it until the big day. I placed her carefully, standing her upright with a small, discreet block of wood wedged behind her feet for stability. Her hands, molded in an elegant, cupped gesture, were positioned at her waist. I took a photo on my phone to remind me exactly how she looked. A good engineer documents everything, so I did. So the next morning I wake up and I walk past the room, caught by a subconscious sense of unease. So I stopped and looked up. The block of wood was still there, but the doll was not quite the same. Her right arm was raised, not dramatically, just slightly. The cupped hand now resting near her cheek as if lost in thought or shielding her face from a non-existent light. I frowned, stepped inside. Gravity, I muttered. Maybe the weight of the old dress shifted. I was reaching for her when I noticed the block of wood was now leaning forward, not backward. It would have been impossible for the doll's weight to shift forward and up like that while still remaining balanced. So I carefully repositioned her, making sure her hands were back at her waist. And this time, I didn't just prop her up. I actually pressed her against the wall. I checked the joint mechanics of the composition body. It was old, stiff, and would have taken a deliberate, firm force to move that arm. And I took another photo. This was now a mechanical problem, a challenge for my rational mind. The second shift happened 2 days later, and it was less ambiguous. I walked into the office to check my email, and before my eyes even went to the shelf, I knew. The doll was sitting, not leaning, but sitting squarely on the shelf, her legs dangling over the edge. Her dress pulled around her. Her head was tilted so sharply to the right that her glass eyes were looking directly at the office chair I was about to sit in. I gotta tell you, I stood in the doorway for a full minute, at least, cold dread replacing logical curiosity. The shelf was high, narrow, and structurally incapable of allowing the doll to fall, pivot, and land in a seated position. This wasn't gravity. It was an act. I didn't yell. I didn't drop my laptop. My skepticism was so deeply ingrained that my first thought was, is somebody pranking me? They have to be pranking me. So this time I locked the doors and I checked the windows and interrogated my wife, who was genuinely confused and a little concerned about my sudden intensity. No one had been in the room. That's what she said. So I took the doll off the shelf, and she felt heavier now, colder than the room air. So I placed her on the wooden dresser. I even drew a faint pencil outline around her feet and the folds of her dress. Then that night, I started hearing things. Subtle sounds that I initially filtered out as standard house noise. A faint, repetitive tapping sound coming from the spare room. When I went to check, the tapping immediately stopped. The sound of something dragging lightly across the floorboards. I was convinced it was rodents. Until the next morning. So the pencil outline remained on the dresser, but the doll was gone. I gotta tell you, my heart hammered against my ribs, a primal frantic rhythm I hadn't felt since I was a child. The doll was sitting in the middle of the carpet, facing the closed door, my only exit. It hadn't moved to another room, but it had moved off a 3-foot-high surface onto the floor, quietly, with purpose. This was the point where I stopped documenting and started panicking. This was beyond physics. This was an active, malevolent entity using porcelain body as a vehicle. I was speechless. But I gotta tell you, the absolute breaking point, the moment my rational mind was shattered, happened a few evenings after I'd locked the doll away in a metal tool chest out in the garage. So I was in the kitchen making a cup of tea. The kitchen is connected to the mudroom, which leads to the garage. I glanced casually toward the mudroom door, and I saw her. The doll wasn't there, of course. She was locked away. But standing in the shadowed corner by the coat rack, I saw the chest. And in the thin strip of light that angled across the floor from the kitchen, I saw the chest's lid was slightly ajar. I froze. I stopped breathing. I told myself I must not have locked the clasp correctly, even though I remembered testing it twice. And then I saw the eyes. Just the eyes. For a fraction of a second, no more than a single intake of breath, the doll was visible. Not the whole doll, not a solid, three-dimensional form, but an imprint of her. A faint, ghostly shimmer of light and color that perfectly outlined her head and shoulders, ending abruptly where the body should be. And then she blinked. The twin pale blue points of light contradicted and expanded in the span of a flicker. It wasn't the reflection of light shifting. It was a deliberate, conscious, muscular movement. The sight, the absolute impossibility of it, locked my muscles. I couldn't move. Then the apparition vanished instantly, leaving only the slightly ajar metal box in the shadows. I'm not a fearful guy, but I did not open the box. I didn't go into the garage that night. I also didn't sleep. The realization was stark and absolute. I had brought something into my house, and it was dark, active, and looking for a way out, or maybe it was looking for a way in. The idea of sending this thing to my beloved daughter was now unthinkable. I had to get rid of it. So the next morning, driven by adrenaline and, quite frankly, sheer terror, I opened the online platform and searched for Curio Finds. But the seller was gone, vanished. The shop link returned a 404 error seller not found message. You know the ones. So I searched the transaction history. The details of the purchase were there, the amount, the date, but the seller's name was replaced with a generic placeholder, and the link was dead. It was as if the account had never existed at all. So in a desperate bid, I retrieved the heavy cardboard box from the recycling bin. I needed the return address. I needed something. But when I looked at the shipping label on the box, the carrier label that had been bleeding ink, it was now entirely illegible. The adhesive paper was still there, but the ink had faded into a pale uniform beige color, a ghost of printed information. The original destination, the seller's address, the tracking number, all dissolved into nothingness. So I took the doll out of the chest. I didn't want to touch her, so I placed her, still seated and staring, into an old canvas tote bag. My initial logical desire was to smash her into 1,000 pieces, but the dread of what might be unleashed by destroying her was too powerful. So I drove 30 miles outside the city, found a secluded, abandoned stretch of land near a closed-down quarry, and threw the tote bag as far as I could into the deep overgrown brush. And I didn't look back. Now that was 6 months ago. I never told Chloe about the doll. I did buy her a beautiful, less historically interesting replacement for her birthday, and she was thrilled with that one. But the fear didn't leave when the doll did. I still don't believe in ghosts or spirits. I tell myself that the doll's old composition joints, the damp climate, the subtle settling of the floorboards, it all conspired to create a perfect storm of optical illusions and suggestibility. I tell myself that stress over the price made me imagine the blink. But every now and then I walk into a room, the living room, the pantry, the hallway, and there's a cold spot, a profound, bone-chilling drop in temperature in an area no bigger than a dinner plate. And sometimes when I'm alone and the house is perfectly silent, I hear the tap, 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 faint, repetitive, like a porcelain finger tapping against a wooden frame. It's always from the spare bedroom, the one with the high shelf, and I can't explain it. I can't rationalize it. All I know is that the object I brought into my house for a few days, an antique from a bygone era, never fully left. The doll is gone, but the haunting, the persistent sense of a cold, wide-eyed stare following me from room to room, that remains. And I'm forced to live with the unresolvable contradiction of my life. A man of logic, haunted by a lie he can't debunk.